Senior Moments program. I'm so happy that you all came. These are all members of our Janesville Urban Forest Alliance, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you brought lots of questions. And remember that this is being taped, so it'll be shown on JATV as well as it'll be on YouTube. Just a couple of things. If you have an electronic device that might ring in the middle, would you silence it so we don't disturb everybody else? If you need to use the facilities, so to speak, it's out towards the front, and it'll be on your left-hand side as you go out. There's water, coffee, tea back in the back, and any of the books that are there you can check out. So if you see one that looks extra fun to read, please take it and check it out. There's evaluations. I ask that you will fill them out at the end so we kind of know what you think. And if you have any suggestions for future programs, and there's going to be an extra little something in it if you do fill out the application. So, the evaluation. So thank you. And Mary, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Thompson.
My name is Rich Bostwick.
Other way.
Whoop, let's try that. My name is Rich Bostwick. Thank you.
Ethan Lee. Scott Schilling.
And I'm Mary Ann Benzo.
And today what we're going to do is we're going to have Mary Ann, who is our sole remaining charter member, give a short history of the Janesville Urban Forest Alliance, which was formerly known as the Janesville Shade Tree Advisory Committee, and why it was formed and what we do.
All right, well, I don't claim to remember every detail since it was so long ago, but I am the only charter member still around. Back around 1995, there was some trimming that was done courtesy the power company. You know, we need to trim the trees that grow near the power lines in order to keep them from interfering. We all want our lights to turn on when we flip the switch and recognize that sometimes there's some problems with the trees that grow around the lines. And so the power company contracted with a tree service to trim some trees on the streets in Janesville's urban forest. Well, unfortunately, the particular company that came to do this work didn't do a really great job. In fact, I would characterize it as a hack job. The trees really looked bad. They didn't use proper pruning practices. They did it at a bad time of the year. And basically, a lot of people were concerned about it, rightly so. And so those of us within the forestry community, and I work for the Department of Natural Resources in the Division of Forestry, as well as folks that work for the City of Janesville and people that were in the local tree care community, all kind of got to talking to each other about the concerns we had and the long-term impacts of these really poor pruning practices. And in our conversation, it really came to light that the City of Janesville did not have any kind of organized urban forest program. We didn't have a designated city forester. The only tree ordinance that was on the books was one that was just put on an emergency basis because of the Dutch elm disease crisis that came through in the 70s. So we really didn't have any rules or guidance in place to help manage and care for our urban forests, and we really didn't have a dedicated investment towards our urban forests. If any of you have ever been in an elevated location in the city of Janesville, I remember that when I was at Mercy Hospital having my kids on a higher floor looking out over the city, it's impactful how many trees we do have in Janesville. You look out and you can see the canopies of the trees, and it's beautiful. I think all of us will agree that having trees in our urban environment make it more beautiful, as well as many other benefits. So I think this group of people came together out of concern and recognized that in the forestry business, it's really about looking forward and planning for the future. And we wanted to try to come together to support the city and our community in making sure that we were thinking about the future of our urban forest so that we could educate the citizens of Janesville about the importance of the urban forest, how to care for the trees in the urban forest, and to make sure that we're planning so that we're continually planting trees so that we always have a good, healthy urban forest. So I think that was the major impetus that got the folks together. The people that were original charter members were some folks from the City Parks Department, the City Public Works Department, as I mentioned, members of the local tree care. Many of tree care companies had representatives that stepped forward, myself as a member of the Department of Natural Resources. So that was kind of the core group of folks that came together and started Janesville Shade Tree Advisory Committee, or JSTAC, which was its original name. So at that point, we kind of put together a charter and eventually got 501c3 status. Our goal originally was to really make sure that Janesville could qualify to be a Tree City USA. Have you driven around the, I should say the state of Wisconsin, but actually it's a national program, and noticed as you come into cities that you'll see a sign at the entrance sign by the population that says a Tree City USA? Anyone ever notice those? There's this tiny little town out in North Dakota I remember driving through. I don't think it had a population of 100, but they were a Tree City USA. So what's required, that's a designation that's sponsored by the Arbor Day Foundation, and you're required to have a city tree board, a city tree ordinance, and you have to spend, I think it's $3 per capita per citizen to care for your urban forest. So there's a number of requirements that you need to do to qualify to be a Tree City USA. So I think it was it 2005? Help me, Mary.
2005 was when the very first.
Was the very first
Right.
went. So
Right.
it went from 1996, our first year, and we kept working towards it, doing different projects and so forth, and eventually we worked with the city fathers and mothers, so to speak, to bring us up to speed so that we could meet the qualifications for Tree City USA. So that was a really super Arbor Day celebration we had that year, which is another requirement for Tree City USA, is that we were able to be designated for the first time, and we've met the qualifications every year since then as a Tree City USA. So that was a really proud accomplishment. But we've done a lot of other projects too, and I guess I would let other folks, I don't want to be the only one to talk here today.
I think probably one of the most visually impactful projects that we did was at Marshall. We did a sight and sound barrier between the school and the highway because the school is right by I-90. And with students and over the years replacing things that died, we ended up having this wonderful, thick, beautiful arborvitae. You probably, if you seem to recognize what it is. Yeah.
I go through there several times, but just last week I thought, they got a double row of trees, that is really cool.
Yeah,
It must help a lot with the noise.
and we're wondering if we're not sure.
Well, we had to sign an agreement with DOT when we put that in, number one, to have even permission to go on the interstate side of the fence there. But we acknowledged that at any time, DOT could determine that they needed to use that space for some other reason. So the trees on the interstate side will always be at risk. There is one row that's on the inside of the school side of the fence, so that one will still be able to remain. And we hope that, people care enough and see the benefit of it enough to be able to fight to keep it over the long term. But the interstate will win in the end no matter what.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think probably Scott might want to speak to the plantings that we've done in some of the parks. Like, for example, down at Traxler. We put in all those maples.
I mean, I would say in the last 10 years, we've probably planted up to 50 to 100 trees, I would guess, in various parks. And that would include like Traxler Park,
Riverside?
Park, we've planted in Rockport Park,
Monterey Park.
Monterey Park. We've also done projects with Harrison Elementary School, we planted some trees there. Wilson Elementary School, and these are mostly oak trees, maple trees. But it's a great program. Like, for example, when we planted at Monterey Park, it was about 4 or 5 volunteers, and all of a sudden we have 15 students. And it's great because they're anywhere between the age of 9 and 12. And this, can we help? Sure, why not? I mean, it's great just to see everybody get involved. And I think, where else have we planted trees?
We planted the trees along Kellogg Avenue.
That's true.
That was one of our earliest projects. There were some trees that had to be taken out, and then it was under power lines. And as we mentioned, we learned this hard lesson about planting trees that would grow up into the power lines. So we got funding through I think it was Wisconsin Power and Light Company, to plant the right trees in the right place. So underneath the power line, we planted trees that wouldn't grow too tall. I think they were mostly crab apples.
That was on the cusp between Wisconsin Power and Light and Alliant.
Okay.
It was the Alliant Foundation that we got the
Thank
grant
you
from.
for
You're
that.
welcome.
So yes, so we got funding from them to plant shorter trees underneath the power lines, and then on the other side of the street, we planted taller trees. Unfortunately, most of those were ash, which at the time were really a great selection for a street tree. Obviously, with emerald ash borer, now that's not the case. But so we did that project. I remember doing storm damage project.
Dog park.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yes,
Dog
we
park,
planted
yes,
out
that
at
was
the dog
fun.
park with Boy Scouts.
They're beautiful out there.
All right, so with Boy Scouts, I think we had them helping us with that at the dog park on the south side of town. What other? We did some pruning projects as well. I remember climbing up around in some trees by some of the schools and doing some terrace tree pruning.
One of the, probably one of the most ambitious projects that we did early in our life was we did a lightning prevention tree on what we call the Lincoln Witness tree on the grounds at the Tallman Museum. There are 2 big oaks there, and one of those oaks is said to be was said to have been on the grounds at the time that Abraham Lincoln visited Janesville. And so we put a lightning prevention system in that tree. Heavy cables, copper cables, all of those pictures are available on our website, which I'll just give you a short plug here. We're at www.jufa1.org. Those pictures will be shown on that website. You can find our history there as well. Plus photographs of people who have come and gone. We have lost some of our members over the years, but we're still here.
So the lightning protection, actually, if that tree, because it's in a high point in the city, were to be struck by lightning, that cable would divert the lightning rather than blasting the bark off the tree and doing significant damage. It takes it down into the ground and disperses it. So that's a method that's used to protect trees. And then we also got funding to put the plaque up that recognizes that tree as a witness tree. So when you're at the Tallman House, if you go to the Arts Festival, stop and take a look at the plaque that's there that describes the history of the tree. It's a beautiful bur oak.
Legislation for our city Arbor Day. At one point, we worked with the city to write a proclamation that the city of Janesville proclaimed that on this date every year it would officially recognize Arbor Day. And so that has become an official part of the legalese in the city of Janesville through our efforts, which is a proud thing. And one other thing that we got that we had been waiting for many years is this young gentleman right here, Ethan Lee, who is our city forester, who has just really enlivened this whole program, I must say.
Yeah, it's been, I think I've been a member of JUFA now for 4 years. So I was an intern for the city of Janesville. And at that time, Scott brought me along to a couple meetings. So participated in some tree planting events. So it's been fun to do. We do a lot of memorial tree plantings. So it's been good to do those. And I think it's a good project for, we get the families to participate. And it's a good way to remember loved ones. So been doing a lot of farmers markets with these guys, so which is a great place to talk trees with people. So and you know, kind of like the Right Tree, Right Place project, I think that's one of our biggest topics we seem to talk about at farmers markets. So you know, autumn blaze maples are great, the fall color is excellent, but there's other alternatives. So diversifying the city's urban forest so that we're currently maple dominated, but to get out and plant some more trees, encourage people to plant trees, and to just be able to talk through and help them pick the right tree for their site. So
Yeah, and
Which reminds me of our tree inventory.
Yes.
Yes, we both
Yeah.
cued into that. How do we know that we're maple dominant? It's because this group also worked with the DNR to get some tree inventory software, and we did samples across the whole city. So we paired up in groups, and we were wandering up and down people's streets looking at their terrace trees, and it was a great opportunity to talk to some of the residents as well when they came out and asked us what we were doing. But we measured the trees, we assessed the health, and identified the species, and then kind of got a sample inventory of what trees do we have in Janesville, what species diversity, what's the condition. You know, we found that we have a lot of maple trees. People love maple trees, especially soft maple, because they grow really fast, and you put a tree in the ground, you want it to get big right away. Well, that has some positives, but it also has some negatives, because fast-growing soft-wooded trees also tend to be weak and susceptible to some problems. So it's good to just try to get some diversity. So ash and maple were the dominant species that we found in our inventory. Obviously, the maple issues, something we want to diversify more. Now with emerald ash borer, we recognize that we don't want all our eggs in that basket either. So that's why it's really good to kind of think about a little bit more outside the box when you're thinking about a kind of a tree to plant, either in your yard or on your terrace.
And if you're interested in that report, Mary Ann was the individual who represented us to the city council. We took that data that we got from that study and took it to the city council and gave them the information and made some recommendations because EAB was just on the horizon. It wasn't here yet. It was still out there. And things like gypsy moth and oak wilt, things like that have real impact on the urban forest, were things that we wanted to be sure they understood could be a critical problem for the urban forest down the road. And that is available. That's on the website. There's you can download a copy. There's a PDF that you can download from for that report on the website.
And we're so lucky to have Mary as our website guru. Thank you so much for doing that. That's the way people get information these days, so we're very grateful for that.
Rich?
Okay, I want to just mention, kind of piggyback on what Ethan was talking about at the farmers market. That's been a really good tool because starting about a year or two ago when the emerald ash borer was first coming to town, they didn't really know what to do about it. We could give them advice on to who to contact to see if the tree was infected, and if it was, were there measures that they could take to protect the tree, and if the tree was going to be eventually cut down, we could provide names of reputable tree service companies to take the tree down. And now, more importantly, and this is the phase we're in now, people come along, they've had ash trees, they've been taken down, the stumps are gone. Now what? They want to plant a tree, but they're kind of gun shy as to what to plant. We mentioned that maple trees are the dominant species now, but they're not the ideal tree. People always thought that they were, and finding out now that they're not. What should we plant? So we do have a list of recommended trees to plant in terraces or in yards, and also instructions how to do it. So that's a good non-threatening way to reach out to people and get them information that they can use to help get our canopy back and flourishing once again.
And we do have those, they're available on the table over there, the lists of the different trees. So feel free to pick them up. Yeah, that's it. Right, right. One thing that we used to do, and we're hoping to get back into for many years, in the spring, the school system had us come out to JSOL and do a tree information class for fourth grade kids. It was a wonderful opportunity for the children, and it was really a good opportunity for us to get to share that knowledge. And unfortunately, that program kind of died out for a while because it was too expensive for the teachers to hire buses to bring the kids out there. So things have improved. They're getting back into it. So that's something that we are, I think, probably pretty proud of, because that teaches kids real hands-on application for forestry tools and how to learn about how to identify a tree by the size and shape of the leaves and by the bark. A good program.
Yeah, I think one nice thing about JUFA, especially with the Arbor Day celebrations, I think we've been, we try and incorporate kids because you get their hands dirty and they just have a great time playing in the soil, planting trees. So we've done a few tree potting, Arbor Day celebrations. So one Arbor Day we potted the trees involving students from the Y. Or
Boys and Girls
Y.
Club.
Boys and Girls
Yep.
Club.
Boys and
Yeah,
Girls Club, yep.
in the fourth ward, too.
So then the following year we let those trees get a little bigger, establish some healthier root systems, and then we were able to go out and with some Boy Scouts and some students, and we planted those trees around the fourth ward to property owners that were interested in having a tree. So
Yeah, that project was brought to us by the Fourth Ward Action Team, and we were really interested and pleased that one of the specific areas of town had taken that kind of initiative, because it was a really good project for them. It meant that they could have a lot more trees in their immediate area.
And that part of town, older part of town, a lot of bigger homes that really cry out for having nice shade trees out front, and most of those are gone, and people are looking for, some answers on that. And this program, well, it was a success, and hopefully other people will see what's happened and kind of take the initiative and think, gee, I can plant a tree too. It doesn't look that hard. So I think that's a good success story right there.
Absolutely. If anyone has a question, if you have a tree,
I have 3 questions.
sure.
Ethan mentioned memorial trees. Where can you put memorial trees? Are there certain spots you can put them?
Sure. Oh, excellent, thank you.
Yeah, but the tape can't hear.
Oh, okay.
Ethan mentioned memorial trees. Is there a certain area in town that you can put memorial trees, or how do you go about if you want to put a tree in for a memorial?
as part of the memorial tree program, we let the purchaser pick a location, and so we will go out as a group and see if that is a good site for a tree. If not, we may propose an alternative, but usually it's an area where people have enjoyed certain areas, or they remember someone in a certain spot, so we plan along bike trails or in parks. But yeah, public spaces is where we've done memorial trees.
And that fella that goes to Traxler Park, have you ever thought of putting that lightning thing to help the tree from lightning by that humongous tree in Traxler Park, sort of in the area of where the shows are, but where the church always has church in September?
Cottonwood.
It's just a
Yeah,
huge tree.
Large cottonwood probably could use some lightning protection. I mean, it would be,
They have a picnic there, the church does, every year, and every year, somebody in that church will comment on the size of that tree. It's huge.
It is.
I mean, I know there used to be 3 large cottonwoods in Traxler Park, and now we're down to, I think that's the lone one left.
Yeah, Traxler has really suffered some losses in the last few years.
Wind
And I think the other ones were wind
Yeah.
damage,
And flood damage.
losses, so
Flood damage.
the lightning protection wouldn't protect it from that, but a tall tree like that would be certainly more susceptible to lightning, so it could be considered. We have to find the funding for doing it, but
Yeah,
Would you folks,
we survive on donations.
would you folks be the one, or the city council, they're going around now and they want you to trim your trees by the terrace? Have they ever given it a thought that maybe once you're 75, maybe the city could do that? I'm too old to
I think
get
the
on a
city
ladder.
folks should answer that one.
So, post Dutch elm disease, the city eliminated their forestry program and put the responsibility of the abutting property owner to maintain terrace trees. So it's ultimately a funding issue. There's just not funding to maintain terrace trees.
They've never thought about a senior discount for the old people.
It's a wonderful suggestion.
I think it's a great suggestion. I tried to convince that guy in the middle this morning, but it didn't work.
Well, it would be a matter of the homeowner or the property owner would need to hire a tree service to do that. And, you know, perhaps there would be that would be an idea to talk to some of the local tree services to see whether they would be willing to offer some sort of discount. I mean, it would be up to them, but I would think that that's a win-win as far as I'm concerned, because having those trees maintained and cared for, you know, has them around for the next trimming, and so they're the gift that keeps on giving as far as maintenance, and allows us to keep those healthy trees on our terraces as well. What?
At 75, we're too old to get on a ladder.
It's a good idea.
You think about it, okay?
I mean, I know we run into the struggle with providing services that are, you know, Janesville has unique situations where the property owner is in charge of the terrace trees. I think we're one of 3 cities or not even, I think maybe less than that, in Wisconsin that has that rule. Like if you go to Madison, it's the municipalities, Milwaukee,
Right.
Appleton, even the little small communities, say like Milton is the same way.
But their taxes pay for the services, so I mean, it's
Yeah.
really a trade-off of where we want our tax dollars to go. And if folks feel like that's a really great investment, like people who really love trees probably do, that would be something to talk to city council members about, that you would support, that some of our tax dollars would go towards a program that would maintain the trees.
And, you know, the old adage about a squeaky wheel, I mean, it's, you know, they're not going to know that you have that issue unless you tell them. So, you know, be proactive and get out there and do it.
I won't go there.
Okay.
I've been proactive since many years ago. One thing and never got attended to at all.
So I have a question.
Sure.
On your tree planting list, you have the growth rate defined as moderate, slow, or fast. How would you define that as far as, you know, inches or feet per year or something like that?
So
What's your idea of a fast tree or a moderate tree or a slow tree?
probably more than 2 feet of growth a year I would consider fast. Moderate being maybe say 10 inches to that 2 foot mark, and slow being less than 10 inches. It's kind of, there are trees out there that will grow, you know, black locust, for example, will grow, wouldn't necessarily recommend that as
Don't plant
a
that.
terrace tree. but it'll grow, and willow will grow, you know, 3 feet or more a year. But underrated tree, a lot of people have a misconception that oaks are slow growing. That is true for, say, a bur oak, but swamp whites and red oaks are extremely fast growing. I shouldn't say extremely, but those are fast growing trees. So, so I guess I kind of got off track a little bit.
But it depends on where it's planted and what the conditions are as well. So even a fast-growing tree might not grow fast if it's in a really poor condition or place where it's not getting adequate moisture or so forth. So there's a lot of variability, but I think that's a good generalization.
I mean, unfortunately, we have to deal with the terrace trees or property. I mean, they build your house, they take all your dirt away, then they'll give you 1.5 inches of nice topsoil over rock, over concrete, over sand, over blacktop, or
Right.
then you expect your tree to grow in a little, I mean, they're amazingly adaptable, but just sometimes the conditions just unfortunately are not there for a tree.
I think I read somewhere that the average lifespan of a tree in an urban forest is only 7 years. Now, that's because so many of them die so soon. It skews the data. Obviously, we have many trees that are much older than that, but it's a really tough environment compared to a natural forest for a tree to grow. You're taking a tree that normally is used to spreading its roots for hundreds of feet perhaps, and you're sticking it into a terrace where it's restricted on all sides by concrete. It's a tough place for a tree to live, and trees that live in the urban forest have to be tough to make it.
And there are things that you need to take into consideration. I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was wondering that what we call Dutch elms, I was wondering about elms. I would think that after the Dutch elm disease time frame, that elms would now be bred to be more resistant of diseases. So are they being used in an urban setting? And I know that hackberries are indigenous to Wisconsin, but I know they're slow growing. I had one in my yard, but they are beautiful trees, and I wondered if they're being used.
Hackberries, if they get a lot of sunlight, they can grow fast, because I have one that just came up as a rogue right by a maple that I cut down, and I mean, that thing just grows like crazy. It also grows branches downward too, so it takes a lot of pruning. But I found that because of its placement is a very fast growing tree. I think Ethan probably would know more about the elms hybrids.
So I've planted several varieties of elms. So there are some they're crossed with Chinese varieties, and so they are, for the most part, I think they say 99.9% resistant.
Liberty's one of them, right?
One thing I have seen with hybrid elms, just they're better for front yards maybe, or side yards or backyards. They do tend to send out shallow roots, so sidewalk heaving can be an issue, but otherwise, as far as resistance and their branch structure and that sort of thing, they're good trees. They do resemble our, American elms that everybody remembers so well. So they're good trees, and there's several varieties, some with really good fall color. I've been trying to plant them, and I would recommend other people to look at those as well. Fast growing as well. So.
And I share your love of hackberries. I have 2 in my yard, and I love the bark. It's very interesting and looks beautiful in the winter as well as the summer. So, and they're a native forest tree in this area as well. So I do tend to have a bias towards planting trees that are native to Wisconsin. It seems to make sense that those would do well. Obviously, there's a attraction to some things that are more unusual as well, and that's where you have to be careful about what you pick, and because we don't want to plant something that's going to become the next invasive problem, which unfortunately we've done once in a while.
I was wondering what they look like.
Hackberry? They have a leaf that looks similar to an elm leaf, which is just kind of a, I don't know.
Jagged football.
Yeah, it's got a tooth, foot, there you go, thank you. That's a great description. Jagged football, it's a little bit uneven at the base, and the bark is very distinctive because it has, it's light gray colored, and it has very distinct warty ridges on the bark. So it's,
Beautiful seeds.
yep.
Right.
That
They're on a long
birds
time,
will eat.
so birds
Yeah, birds love them. I think there's some on the terrace near the intersection of Memorial and Ringgold, near the north side of the fairgrounds. So if you drive around that neighborhood and look at some of the terrace trees, I think there's some hackberries there that you would be able to probably pick out from the bark.
Rich is right about the branches and how they grow, because I had a definite altercation with a neighbor who kept saying, those branches are too low, you need to trim them up, they are too. In fact, I had to rather threatening and said, "This is my tree and I like it low." So,
Well, that's a good point to bring up, and that's something else that if you have some expertise in forestry and you drive around the city of Janesville, you sometimes get a little irritated when you see some of the trees in the city where it was great for people to plant trees and they planted them, but then they didn't pay any attention to them. And trees, just like children, need a little bit of training as they're growing so they head the right direction, right? So it's very important to recognize that you should be pruning your trees to make sure that they're growing in a good direction, that the branches aren't crisscrossing each other, and there's definitely proper ways and proper times to prune your trees. So if you are hiring someone to do it, make sure you're hiring someone reputable. If you're doing it yourself, take the time to do a little bit of research and find out how to properly prune trees. You don't want to clip branches off and leave stubs, because trees actually have a very great natural capacity to heal over wounds if you prune them correctly. And so by doing it correctly, you'll help keep your tree healthy and resistant to wind and storm damage and things like that for the long run. Just letting them grow rogue and wild is not necessarily doing them a favor.
And one thing that often gets neglected for shade trees is watering. We assume that because water comes out of the sky, that's going to be adequate, and it's really not. We learned that much to our dismay a few years ago when we had those terrible droughts. We had droughts 2 years in a row, and the trees really suffered. So remember to water your trees if it's dry. They should have like an inch a week. So.
what is the protocol now for that? Hold on. What is the protocol now after the limb has been severed? It used to be paint, then it was tar, and then it was nothing. I'm a do-nothing person. What do you recommend?
I say do nothing. Sorry, I'll
Me
jump on
too.
you. Trees have a natural capacity to heal wounds as long as the cut was properly done, not cutting into the branch collar. There's a wrinkled area of bark right at the base of every place where a branch comes off another branch. That's called the branch collar. And when a proper pruning cut is made, that wrinkled area kind of it'll look like a donut, and it'll close up pretty quickly if the prune is done properly. By putting any kind of treatment on there, especially a tar-like treatment, you're trapping moisture in there, which actually may cause decay to progress and be a problem. The only time you should do any kind of pruning treatment, and this is the only exception, is if you're addressing storm damage on elms or oaks during the time when they would be susceptible for the transmission of Dutch elm disease or oak wilt, and that's a time of year when insects are active. You should never prune the trees during that time, but if damage occurs, say a summer storm comes through and you have to clean up branches that broke off, and then you should use the pruning spray that you can get at a hardware store or a garden store, but that's the only time you should do any kind of pruning treatment.
And there's good information in this is the bulletin or the tree planting guide that we put together, and we mentioned earlier, and we also mentioned is on the website. This is a really good. We tried our best to put everything that you would need to know about street trees in here. So I would recommend that you pick one up. We still have a few left over there if you haven't picked one up.
Hello. I'm here kind of for two purposes. I'm a resident of Janesville. I also work for a nursing facility, and we're actually in South Beloit, and we're looking to do something for Arbor Day and donate some trees. So I was coming here to get some ideas. I ran across this group on the website. And I went to Adams School here, and as a kid, we did the leaf collecting in the fall. You tried to see how many different kinds of trees you could find.
Cool.
It was probably 1970 something or other. Maybe still even have the book. So it's interesting to hear about the kinds of trees. But as far as she mentioned places to donate to Janesville, are there specific places that need trees more than others? She asked about getting permission or whatever, but are there places where you're actually asking for people, public places where they need different trees planted?
So we've taken down, we being the city and talking about public trees, a few hundred ash trees probably, and annually we'll plant, we try and shoot for about 50 trees. If we can get a few more to plant, we will.
When you say we, do you mean the city?
The
or-
city,
Right.
yeah, the city, sorry. And so on top of the ash, there's also kind of a even age stand of maples in Janesville. So a lot of maples were planted post Dutch elm disease, even in the 60s, and so those trees are kind of reaching their maturity. So on top of ash, we're taking down quite a few maples. So there are still plenty of places that need trees, and there's greenbelt terraces that can be planted. There's park space, open green space, so there are plenty of areas that could use it.
So if we wanted to donate, if there were people that wanted to contact you and say, hey, we have such and such a tree we'd like to give, is there some place that needs it versus, a specific location like that we were connected to?
I think, if you're interested in doing that, I think you could certainly reach out and email JUFA, and we could talk about locations to do that, and we could set up a planting day and a planting project. We have done that before.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you always do that with the public place? Like if there's a neighborhood, I know you do it with the fourth ward.
We did, but all of the fourth ward plantings were done, Scott, you can tell better where they were they in their yards? I wasn't there that day.
Yeah, the
so-
plantings in the fourth ward, it was, the property owners say they lived on High Street, for example. It was a street in the fourth ward, say 25 High Street, I would guess. They had an ash tree that was removed due to emerald ash borer. And what they were doing is we made a large list, and they could get, I think, up to 2 or 3 replanted seed or trees that were probably, 3 feet tall maybe.
Right.
And it was a program done through, it was the Fourth Ward Action Team, right?
Fourth ward action
Or,
team,
yeah,
right.
And it was, the main sponsor was Kay Dupree, who was on the city council at the time. But she got the whole community involved, and it was kind of neat that one day. But it would be neat to do that program, say, in a different part of town,
Right,
or...
I live close to the Hawthorne Park area, and you guys have
Okay,
cut down
yep.
an enormous amount of trees in that area, and it would be nice to, have some type of program to replant them, or...
Do you know if is there a neighborhood
I don't know,
group, or
not that I'm aware of, but...
do you have any neighbors that are interested in more trees?
I walk the dog, and I'm always like, oh my gosh, these people lost 4 trees, these people lost 3 trees, like, we need to get trees, and of course, the dog and I are always, in the summertime, dodging across the street to find the shade.
Well, that sounds like we need some warm weather so people can get out and get walking around and talking to their neighbors.
I was like, we need to get some trees planted
Yeah,
back where
exactly.
there's
It
no
can raise
trees.
organically an organization to get something together. And we're supportive of that, and whatever we could do to help out with something like that with a local group, we're definitely would be on board.
And just in case you hadn't noticed, over there on the corner by that table is a big bag with some little things sticking out of the top. We have 3 trees here today that we're going to give away by raffle. You just, Maureen has set up an evaluation form, and on the evaluation form, we're gonna pull 3 of the evaluation forms with your names, and give you a call, or if you want to wait, we can do it today while you're still here.
Yeah, hang around, and then you can take your tree home with you.
We have 3 different trees. Ethan, what do we have?
So we have a small tree, redbud. So it's when you drive around early in the spring, it's the tree without any leaves, but it's got all these nice pink flowers right on the twig. They now have a few strains, Columbus strain being one that's hardy. We're kind of at the very northern zone for redbud, but there are some strains, and especially if there's a little bit of a wind buffer, they still do really well. Kind of a medium-sized tree is a Katsura tree. It's Japanese, and that tree, the leaves emerge with a nice purple color. So right away in the spring, purple leaves, they get to a lush green in the summertime, and then a really nice yellow fall color in the fall. And Mary had a little fun fact that you can get a little bit of a cinnamon scent from those in the fall.
Right.
Then our large tree, it's American sycamore. And so if anybody's gone over the Monterey Bridge and you look out towards the rock, towards Monterey Bay, there's that large tree, roughly 85, 90 feet tall, that's got all the white bark at the very top. That's a sycamore.
There's also that beautiful one in Riverside Park
Yep.
at the north end of the park.
Yeah, it's a great tree. It gets 100 feet tall and 80 foot spread. So we're those are the 3 species we'll be giving away. We're also going to do a tree sale and as partnership with Rotary Gardens on the 28th.
Right.
So down at by their Hort Center, Mary.
Right, it's going to be done by the Hort Center. It's a day of, they have compost sales this is the first one is going to start this week. And they'll continue on for, I don't know, 2 months. And this one is on the 28th, and we have 40-some trees, 44 trees that we're going to be selling. And these are only $10 a piece. They're just, we just want to get trees into people's hands so they can get them in the ground. So please come visit and buy a tree.
And the hope is that money raised this year, we can buy a few extra trees next year and maybe start reaching out for some neighborhood type projects and say, we bought 50 this year, we sold, we covered our costs, and the amount we sell over the top, we buy that many extra trees next year, and maybe we try and support a neighborhood planting project. So
Right.
That's our hope,
Like your
like
neighborhood.
Mary said, just to get more trees out in the community because we've lost so many.
Well, Janesville used to be Bauer City.
Yes.
Yeah.
Years ago, yeah, I did some research on trying to find historic pictures, and it was dark. It was like a tunnel. Yeah.
Well, I have several questions. First, I have 2 very large elm trees. I've had them treated twice, like every other year.
Elm,
Do I?
ash or elm?
Oh, I'm sorry, ash trees, yes. And do I have to keep doing this every other year or something? Or is this going to be under control, the ash borer?
So the safe answer would be definitely for the foreseeable future. In theory, once the food source starts to go down, you'll have less of an EAB population, and maybe you can extend your treatments.
Okay.
But I don't know that I'd step out on the ledge and say at some point you'll never have to treat.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like under control or.
We still have a high population
You do?
EAB in
Okay.
Janesville,
Okay.
yeah. So, and that'll probably be even for the next several years. I would say for the next 6 or 8 years, definitely you're going to be doing that every other year treatment just to be safe. And then
My other question is, I have 2 fairly old crabapple trees. They're not the probably newer variety, and they always lose all their leaves. And I was told it was some kind of a fungus or something. Or
Yep, crab scab.
Scab, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
is there any way to treat that? Or they're really
There is,
big
but you're
and they're
probably not
old.
going to want to do it.
Okay.
It involves, you would have to spray several times in
The
the
whole
spring,
tree?
I believe, yes.
Oh,
Right.
And you would have to, when those leaves fall down, you have to clean them up. Instead of running them over with the lawnmower, you actually have to take them
They're
because
kinda-
the fungus
Kind
spreads.
of large for that.
Right, and I
Yeah,
have
and
2 in my yard that are exactly the
I mean, they
same,
won't
and they're
hurt anything.
beautiful in the spring with
I
the
know,
flowers,
right.
and then by the middle of the summer, they're bare because the leaves have all fallen off. So at some point, replace them with a newer variety, but I think the treatment probably is
Okay,
cost prohibitive.
One more question. I have another tree, and I don't remember the name of it, and it gets eaten alive by Japanese beetles.
it's probably a
Yeah.
linden.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
There again, it's a really large tree. There's no way I can spray it. So is there anything else I could do with it? Or
I'm not sure if is there a soil treatment for that?
There's a drench and there's a granular from, both of them are made by Bayer.
as a treatment for Japanese fever.
Yeah.
You put it under the tree and it's taken up by the roots,
Okay.
and it won't completely eliminate them because it seems to be an unlimited source. If you kill some, the neighbors' ones will
That's
fly
true.
over to your tree.
all over.
I get a lot of satisfaction just, picking them, realizing you can't get to the top
Yeah,
of a
right,
tall tree,
yeah.
but just picking them and dropping them into soapy water and
I know,
watching them
I have
drown.
plenty
but
of other.
It's like emptying the ocean with a teaspoon,
I have
so.
plenty of other rose bushes and everything.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Yeah, the easiest would be, just makes a soap in a spray container and spray them with, I mean, it only lasts till the next rain.
Right,
but
yeah, I know.
it kind of deters them. Nobody, I guess when I was a kid, I didn't like soap in my mouth either, and that's what the bugs are doing.
Yes,
so.
don't use the traps, whatever you do.
How would you know that?
If
I
you
always
use
heard
the
you put 'em on
traps,
your neighbor's
it just
yard.
brings more of them in, so.
Right.
Or you put it on your neighbor's
Yeah, talk
tree.
your
Yeah.
neighbors to use the
Yeah.
traps.
That's what I've heard, yeah. Okay, well, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's another
Question back there.
Can you plant a memorial tree in Rotary Gardens, or do you have to get it approved by Rotary Gardens, or how do you do that?
They have their own program.
Right, they do.
So you can't do the one through us for
And do you
Rotary
have
Gardens.
anything to do with when they take trees down, like, I don't know if you've noticed, since they opened that up where the old Menard used to be, and they took down all those
trees.
trees that just,
Yep.
can you stop people from taking them down, or do the people that, develop that just take it down because they want them out of there?
So they do have commercial properties have a landscaping plan that they need to have approved. And so they have certain requirements they have to meet as a commercial property. So I guess that's the simple answer. And that's for the lifetime of the property, or while that business occupies the property, they need to maintain.
But they
those
can take down the big old trees and put up those little sticks? I mean, those
Yep.
trees, it's so bare looking there now.
Yeah, and sometimes, although it may seem bad, by the time equipment, if proper tree protection isn't used, the root zone gets trampled by equipment, and ultimately you end up with a tree that maybe suffers on for a few more years, and then ultimately has to come down. So
Yeah, that's a fairly insidious kind of damage too, because it's not really that visible.
right, yep.
So,
Root zone damage,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I see that quite commonly when people build a house and they buy a wooded lot and they're trying to retain as many of the existing trees as they can. But if you don't do proper protection and all the equipment coming in to build the house compacts the root zone of those trees, you get your new house with the beautiful trees around it, and within a few years, the trees all suffer and die because of the damage that's done to the root system. That's much maligned, the root system. People kind of forget about it being under the soil there, but it's the key to the trees being healthy. So it's really important to remember.
I have a question about the tree at the Lincoln Tolman house, the oak that you were talking about. Has anybody ever planted some of those and maybe made them for sale?
we did
so
that.
we could have, so we could have in our yard.
We did that one year. In fact, I do remember I had one of those acorn picker-uppers. It looks like a big vacuum cleaner sort of thing. And we collected acorns from the 2 Tallman bur oak trees, and we potted them. And a number of us took them to our house, and we put the hardware cloth over the top to keep the squirrels from digging them all up. And I think we ended up with, for all the acorns that we planted, maybe a few dozen.
Yeah.
And I think we sold them when we were doing an event at Rotary Gardens. And we did sell them, but it wasn't something that we continued to do because it was labor and space intensive. And for the results that we got, it was somewhat disappointing.
yeah, the
but-
germination rate was really low.
yeah.
So,
But
I
we
don't think
did-
they'll mind
it
if
was
you
a good
go
idea.
and grab some acorns from
Right?
Rotary's land. But
Oh, yeah, they wouldn't mind if you pick up the Tallman acorns, I'm sure. Take a lot, though. Arbor Day, it's the
Arbor Day.
last,
Oh, yeah.
last Friday in April. It's a movable feast. It's always the last Friday in April in Wisconsin, so hopefully you can have a chance to celebrate by planting a tree. Do we have a spot picked for our Arbor Day celebration
We
this
do.
year?
Ethan
All
came
right.
up. Ethan had a brainstorm for
Join
this
us.
one.
Where is it?
So this year at Oak Hill Cemetery, we're doing the Arbor Day tree planting, and this year it's going to be kind of a beautification project. So for those of you that are familiar with Oak Hill, there's a columbarium right off of Hamilton, and so we recently put a sidewalk off of Hamilton up to the columbarium, and we're going to do kind of a circle type planting out from that columbarium, and it's going to be a mix of flowering trees. So we're going to have Japanese lilac,
Fringe,
a couple kinds of serviceberry,
right?
And one other that I'm forgetting. So some kind of unique, tried not to pick crab apples, just so I like to plant trees that are a little different, and then if people call me and ask what I can plant, then I can give them a few sites and say, this is what it looks like in person. Because Google's great, but it can't take you there and let you touch it. So,
And we're actually going to plant 16 trees.
yeah, 16 trees.
Yeah.
Is that where our Arbor Day celebration will be, on
Yes.
Arbor Day? Okay,
Yes.
and is that in the afternoon?
It'll
At
be
4 o'clock?
4 p.m.
4 o'clock, so if you want to come and join us for Arbor Day celebration.
And that's the 27th, is that correct?
Last
Friday.
Friday. would be
Yeah,
the-
I think that's correct. Yeah. Yep, the 27th. Yeah, because then we're doing the Rotary sale the next day.
On the
We're always
28th.
looking for, I guess, ideas for activities, placements. I mean, I know we, in the past, just due to having city staff, we've done projects on, mostly public right-of-ways, parks, street, but we have done work with other private industries, or, like say your employer, if you talk to a supervisor or a boss and say, hey, do you have $500, and we could get a big group project, say, for example, Prent, for example, or, a company that has some green space, a large area, and they want to plant some trees on their property, and we could work with whoever's in charge at your employer, just trying to help out not just the public, but the private sector too, and get trees, replacement trees, or just trees planted in general.
And if anyone's interested in joining our organization, you don't have to be a tree expert in any way. You just have to love trees. So we have lots of different kinds of projects and volunteer opportunities, whether it's planting, whether it's educating, whether it's just helping out with a website or anything like that. So we would
And if you're-
welcome anyone interested.
If you're a Facebook person, we just put up a new Facebook page. We had started one as a business Facebook page. Didn't work out too well.
Okay.
So we changed it over to an open group, and all of our announcements are always on there if we're looking for volunteers. And believe me, if you want to come and plant some trees with us, we would just love to have you. We are always looking for volunteers. This is a volunteer-driven organization. Nobody gets paid to do anything. We just come and share our mutual love of trees. So, did
I
you have-
can attest to that. Many years ago, I became a member.
Right.
When it was still J-Stack.
Yep.
And they welcomed me with open arms, and I know nothing about trees, but I learned a lot being there. So if you want to learn, these are the people to learn from.
Thank you, Maureen.
Where did the emerald ash borer come from?
Came from China in shipping material. So just the life cycle of the insect itself, it can live in wood for a long time, a year, just under a year essentially. So when they were building pallets out of Chinese ash, which are tolerant of EAB, we have many native borers in Wisconsin, and our native trees can tolerate their feeding, and they don't become these overwhelming populations. But so the Japanese or Chinese ash were turned into pallets, came over here, and first came in Detroit. So
In Michigan, yeah.
yep.
Then all the logs that they cut when they cut an ash tree down, those have to be destroyed then, huh?
So we're initially that was the thought, but now that emerald ash borer it was actually just recently the whole state of Wisconsin was quarantined, every county. So now although it is still recommended that you move it as short a distance as possible, the county or the state is entirely quarantined. So there aren't as many restrictions on, and maybe Mary can speak on this a little bit more, but you're not as limited on moving firewood. You don't have to destroy the wood like was previously done.
So, yeah, the state of Wisconsin and other private woodland owners, we're doing management in a lot of areas where native ash are growing to actually preemptively reduce the amount of ash in a forest stand. And we still are being able to utilize those trees as long as you don't let them die and start to decay. If we can cut them before they're dead, that we're actually still using the ash lumber, making it into products. It's a very good quality hardwood, so we're still utilizing it. Our current markets.
It's just Janesville Urban Forest Alliance. Now, there are two. The second one is taking down a Facebook page is harder than putting it up. So I'm still struggling with getting the old one off. So
Janesville
Urban Forest Alliance, right?
Alliance. Did you have a follow-up?
That Dutch elm disease, what's the nature of that?
It's a fungal disease. Fungus grows in the water-conducting vessels of the tree and prevents water from getting to the roots, to the crown and the leaves of the tree, which is very similar to what oak wilt is as well. But it can be transmitted by an insect. So an insect that is attracted to a wound on an infected tree can pick up the spores of the fungus and fly to a wound. That's why we never want to prune those trees during the time when insects are active, and then introduce that fungus into a healthy tree, and then it starts to spread. And then once it's there, it can spread through root grafts. So when an oak tree grows near another oak tree, the roots actually will graft together underground, same with elms. And so that's why you saw Dutch elm disease spread down the street, is that once one tree got it, it spread through the root connections from one tree to the next. But it's a fungal disease, and it blocks the water conducting vessels.
Literally starving them to death.
Yeah.
I remember when I was little, a long time ago. Let's say about 1955, I live in Burlington, and I can remember them spraying. They had huge sprayers, and they'd drive up and down the street, and they'd be spraying.
I think they were probably
DDT.
trying to kill the beetles that spread the disease.
Okay.
But once the trees had the disease, the spraying, you could kill the beetles, but if it's already in the neighbor tree, that wasn't really doing any good. But you feel like you want to do something, and sometimes it's not always well thought through.
Oh, I'm done.
Yep.
Yeah, it just breaks my heart to see all the ash trees being taken out. We got a Browns Lake as a area where the park, and God, they just, the amount of trees they've taken out of there, it just, I mean, I don't know.
Ash are very wonderful shade tree, terrace trees, yard trees. They're very adaptable, very beautiful, and this is definitely hitting us hard.
It is, definitely.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, folks, if you would like to fill out your
Raffle form.
your raffle form, we'll stick around for a while if you'd like to, and there are a couple more of these.
Thank you so much for coming today and asking
thank you.
great questions.
Thanks, everybody.